All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Vulnerability is a Vibe with Amber, your helper's helper, right? I'm excited to be here today. This podcast is all about helping our helpers, educating, empowering, and encouraging, right? So we're going to focus on that a little bit today. Today, our topic is turning adversity into action. But we'll do lots of other topics throughout this time, once a month, moral distress, burnout, all of those types of topics that come up, especially as the helper, right? Um, the good thing is, too, sometimes we get into these topics and we're like, oh, that's a lot of information. And you listen to this podcast, you're like, yes, that's great. Then you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Right. And so the good thing is that we have training after we do a training like a couple weeks after we do the podcast, so you can get more information. And then we do a coaching session, so it's time for you, like, oh, let me dive a little bit deeper. So look out for that as well. But before we get into the topic, I'm so excited. Like when I was like, ooh, this topic, I was like, I know who I'm calling right away. I knew who I was calling. My brother Gino Tucker. I was like, yes, he's going to be on with me today. So I'm excited to introduce you. Please tell them about yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Miguel Gino Tucker. Everyone knows me as Gino. I'm the CEO and founder of Remember Us Urban Scouts, a local youth nonprofit, youth development nonprofit, primarily serving the Linden area, but we do programming across Columbus, where we, teach the young people how to thrive and just not survive. Our mission is to teach the young people the skills and the social capital needed to be successful in school, their personal life, and their careers. And we make sure we do this through Wellness Wednesdays with Miss Amber, through community engagement, really teaching young people how to value themselves and the communities that they come from. So I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about how to turn adversity into, I call it power, because,
Right.
at the end of it, you're using skill sets that made you who you are to
Yes.
benefit where you want to go.
Yes, I love it. I love it. So it's interesting because as soon as I think about that topic, I'm like, our experiences have shaped us to be who we are. And I wouldn't take that away from my life because I wouldn't be where I am today. And a lot of times, as helpers, that's our why. It drives our why, our experiences, and we're like, oh, I want to do this because of my experience. So it's interesting because often, even when we're working with young people, obviously both Gino and I work with young people as well, and it's like helping them understand that this is temporary. This is right now. There is so much more that happens after this moment. And so really thinking about this topic, turning adversity into action. What does that mean to you when I say that, Gina? What do you think about?
To me, it means understanding what your strengths are.
Mm,
A lot of times when we grow up in unfortunate situations that create the character of who we are, we think that we're not worth it. We think that
mm,
we don't have no good skill sets. We don't think that we can make it in the real world. When truth be told, you've been trying to learn how to survive every day of your life. That's a
mm,
skill set that most people don't even have because they've never been in a situation where they got a gun to their head, where they're being shot at, where they're being robbed, where they're scared to walk outside.
mm-hmm.
So you got to critically think about how to survive. That's a skill.
Yeah. Yes.
And, turn into action is when you actually realize what those skills are
Mm-hmm.
and either work or do something that reflects that skill that provides you with purpose in life.
Yes. So, I got to ask you some more questions. So, tell me, like, how that has impacted what you do. So, some of your life experiences, how has that now made you the CEO of Remember Us Urban Scouts and doing the work that you do?
Man, it's my story. It's the reason that I'm here. My nephew was the breaking point. My nephew Henry Green the fifth, who was killed by the Columbus Police Department, uh, really changed who I thought I was, who I knew I was, and who I thought I could be. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I got connected with the People's Justice Project, which really, rest in peace, Amber Evans, who was my mentor, showed me how to turn pain into purpose.
Mm.
I took
Yeah.
that to turning purpose into power
Mm.
because we're trying to empower each other. We're trying to understand who we are and the adversity, the struggles that we live through make us who we are. It makes you, it creates the values and the morals that you live by.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if it's the street code and you go get a job, you still
Yeah.
gonna live by that street code, no matter if they got another code that you need to live by.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just understanding that the experiences that I went through in life, God needed me to go through them experiences.
Mm.
So that way I can reach the young people and do the work that He put me here to do.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's interesting because I think, when you're in the midst, right? When you're in the storm, you don't see no way out, right? You're like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. But then once you get past it, you're like, wow, that was a lot. But now I know when storms are going to keep coming. But now I know I might need an umbrella. I might need someone else to be there with me to help me stay. The wind's blowing to help me stay strong. You start to understand that you have the tools to get through some of the other stuff because you've been through stuff. You don't know until you've been through it. You're like, oh, I know this. I know how to do this. Um, and so it's interesting because that's the goal, is to help people understand you have skills. Like you said, what does that look like? You have them. Now, how do you use them? How do you tap into the skills that people may have thought that wasn't a skill for you, but it is a skill? Um, it's interesting because I was like, growing up, I was homeless several times, moved city to city. I'm like, okay, where are we moving now? It was like always something. We were homeless. We often was evicted. Always had stuff growing up. And I remember the time I decided to I was like, I'm gonna start my own business. Right. And I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do it. Right. And one of the biggest driving forces for me to start was because I know how to survive. Like you were talking about, I know how to make something out of nothing. I've already been there. I've already done that. So what could be worse than what I've already handle. So it was like it drove me to be able to keep pushing and keep going. When other times some people were like, oh, but what if? But what if? Well, what if I didn't do it? But because you have that internal drive that only has come from your experiences, it shows you something different. It opens a different door that sometimes other people, like you said, might not be able to open because of their experiences, right? And so I want us to kind of get into, because we kind of talk, it's interesting. We'll have an experience, and it's like that to me is like, okay, we've had the experience. In the midst of it, we're kind of like that victim of it, like, this is, I'm dealing with a lot. And then we talk about resiliency, right? And tapping into your resiliency, and you can build resiliency. But how does it move from, Gino, to me, resiliency to grit? How do you move from that?
I mean, I really don't like resiliency, to be honest. And you know that I say it all the time because it makes people believe that we have to take blows and immediately bounce back.
Mm.
And it's like you said it earlier, the storms are going to keep coming. That's all we know growing up in some of the communities that we came from. And I don't care what social status you have, a storm is a storm.
Right.
Uh, and how that storm impacts you is going to be different from everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that ain't never had no money getting fired is going to be a different impact from somebody who is on Wall Street and they get fired.
Right.
Their
Mm-hmm.
whole life is going to change. So I think the resiliency makes the grit. You know, once we understand that, okay, I'm going to be living in a storm for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about, is that storm going to be light, mild, or heavy? Because it doesn't stop. Even when you get to that point where you like, yes, I made it. I
Mm-hmm.
started my business. It's going great.
Yeah.
Things is good. Here comes another storm. And it's just because you elevated to a higher point on the mountain. So them storms look different. You
Yeah.
slide down a little easier. Them steps become a little bit harder. But the experiences that you had made you to be able to be the one to withstand everything that's thrown at you. And heck yeah, you're gonna have bad days.
Mm-hmm.
To where I have them all the time. I don't know if I'm gonna make it today. I'm overwhelmed. This is too much. I ain't nobody teach me how to do this. I don't even know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who to reach out to. But I think it's understanding that you have to make a plan for yourself.
Mm.
And that's when the adversity turns into action because you're recognizing it.
Mm-hmm.
You're being intentional about making steps to do whatever you need to get where you're trying to go. And
Mm-hmm.
you're taking action on those steps and track.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And it's interesting. So I read this book called by Christian Moore, and I really like this book because it talked about 4 types of resiliency. And I know we don't like to use this word because we know, but it talked about rock bottom resiliency, street resiliency, resource resiliency, and relational resiliency. That to me, when I read that for the first time, I was like, that's it. That's why I have this drive that someone else might not have because I got this street resiliency that, oh, this is where it comes from. As I went through it, I'm like, so how do you foster that? How do you encourage people to tap into some of those experiences they have and build those skill sets? And I thought about those things. I was like, street resiliency, we if you come from there, you already come from there. I don't I don't want to build it for you, or even rock bottom resiliency. If you there, we can build from there. But when I think about resource and relational resiliency, we can build that. That's what we can do that as helper for ourselves and for our individuals we working with. And so to me, that is, like I said, everything. When I think about it, I'm like, how can I make sure I continue to have resources for myself, be a resource, and do that for other people that I'm working with. And so I know you do this. So when I think about relational resiliency, talk to me about how that impacts what you do, because I know you have relational resiliency. I know you have resource. I know you have all 4 of these. Okay, because I know you. But how that impacts you as a helper, and then you as just Gino as the person.
So as you said that, I was sitting here thinking about them four, and I think they can interchange, however. But if you think about it from the rock bottom resiliency, right? You have nowhere to go but up. And then if you think about it from the street form of resiliency, I tell people all the time, they be like, how do you do this? How do you not be scared to ask for this? How do you not be scared to do this? And it's like I came from an environment where the worst that could happen to me
Mm-hmm.
is I died or went to prison. And now that I am who I am and working in the space that I am, the worst thing you can do to me is tell me no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to be alive. I'm not going to be in prison. And I might find somebody that tells me yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So understanding that you navigated life through that street resiliency
Mm-hmm.
because you had to overcome being on the bottom
Mm-hmm.
turns into how you learn to value the relationships and resources that you are presented. So, we teach our kids all the time how to communicate with each other
Mm-hmm.
because communication is the main piece that's needed to foster resources or relationships.
Mm-hmm.
If I rub you the wrong way, you may not ever come back to my need. And if I understand how to cultivate a relationship through communication, now we have a bridge that we can work on.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Mm-hmm.
you're somebody who's invested into me, you may be able to give me points and pointers on how to communicate better, to get more resources, to get more social capital, because all of it combined together creates that social capital that's needed for anybody to survive.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people all the time, you could be the richest person in the world and have nothing.
Right.
You could be the brokest person in the world and have everything, all because you have the right people that's connected through your social capital.
Yes, yes. I love that. And I know we've been talking a lot more about social capital. And when we think about this as relational resiliency too, I think about, like you said, that combination of those two, of resource and relationships, because we are naturally beings that need other beings. It's not an option. We need that innate need is not like it's just what we do. And so even in these scenarios, as we tap into our stuff, like, oh, what does that look like for me? How can I continue to do this work? We have to understand what our history is a little bit. And I've talked to you about this before, but understanding, like, sometimes our adversity, things that we've been through, we have to work on. We can't just be like, I ain't going, you know what, that didn't happen. I don't know what's going, really? Right? If we don't work on our own stuff, we can't continue to do this work. Right. And that is even one of the main reasons why I feel like this podcast and helping the helpers is because we often get stuck in a space because we, like I said, this often is our push of our why. So we've been through some stuff. And then a lot of people have this expectation that we are good, that we have it together. Right. And then our healing as a helper gets pushed to the back as we continue to try to help and other people. And that to me is doing disservice to our community and to ourselves, right? So I want to get into that. Like, how has working on your healing um, made you strive and grow personally? I mean, I think in all areas, personally and professionally, in all areas of your life. How has that helped you?
Uh, Before it helped me, it hurt me. Uh, because you gotta dive deep into yourself and find out what's contributing to your behaviors.
Mm,
Because everything's a behavior. It's a emotional response that creates a behavior. So you gotta challenge yourself to be comfortable getting uncomfortable, finding out more about yourself, and then being intentional about the work to develop yourself. Uh,
mm,
and this is both. I find it for me, it's easier done both professionally and personally
mm-hmm,
as they intertwine so much. You have personal conversations with your professional colleagues, or whatever the case may be, and the pain that you're going through, if it's not addressed, will continue to contribute to negative situations if you don't handle them. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times people think that somebody's offending them when it's the way that you perceive what they said that was the offensive part.
mm-hmm,
They
mm-hmm,
said something in a normal way that just because you have some pain on the inside, that you received it the wrong way. And it's an everyday battle. You
mm-hmm.
know, it's not no cure that's gonna happen overnight. I, it's a constant battle.
Mm-hmm.
People, you battle with it. I battle with it.
Yeah.
You know, because as you continue to grow, you see different areas that you need to tweak. And
Mm-hmm.
dang, I thought I was done with this stage of life. And
Right.
it's like, nah, you got to go a little bit deeper because you uncovered something while you
Mhm.
was uncovering something.
Right. Right. I think it goes back to like what I was talking about earlier, the storms, right? We know the storms is coming. It's interesting. So I think about the hurricanes, right? Right. And you think about hurricanes coming. And so they give you this warning. Okay, the hurricane's coming. And people are like, oh, let me get what I need to get. Let me try to get the sandbags. Or am I going to leave? What am I going to do? Right? They give you this warning that the hurricane's coming. But are you really ever prepared? Until you're in the midst, you can prepare as much as you can. But until you're in the midst, then you understand. So then the next time, so especially it's the first time you've been through it. So the next time something happens that's similar, you like, oh, I remember. As soon as that siren goes off, I'm leaving this time. Or soon, right? That you start to learn from. Wait a minute, I know some different skills because I went through this. And that to me is tapping into, like, okay, we've been through this. Let me learn some skills from it, but I have to do some reflection to be able to do that. you can't just go through it and you just like, I'm just going through it, and then you don't talk about it. You don't build yourself so that you're ready for the next thing. And I think that a lot of times, unfortunately, as helpers, we just trying to help. We like, I'm good, but and we're just trying to, we putting all our energy into doing this other stuff, doing this other stuff, doing this other stuff. And then all of a sudden, like when COVID hit, all of a sudden when you by yourself, you like, oh, I got some things to work on. And it's interesting because a lot of times we don't get the chance. We're like, because we put so much effort into making sure everybody else is good. And we don't do the best job at taking care of ourselves. And so even when I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, that, even for myself, I'm like, y'all know, sometimes, we both be like, we doing too much, doing team too much. But making sure, like, how do I make that priority, right? How do I continue to build my, not just my resiliency, but my grit, so that I could keep pushing to do this work, right? And so I was thinking about this topic, I was like, what do I do all the time? Like, I'm like, what is that for me? What continues to make me push in all situations that make me, like, go to that next level? And I mean, for me, it's always, I have to get away. I have to get my mind right. And so for me, that might be traveling. That for me, that might just, I need to get focused. And so a lot of times I can't do it when I'm thinking about all the other stuff. So I have to get away to get focused. And so thinking about that for you, what is your thing? Like, okay, this is when I'm pushed against I'm in this storm where I know it's coming. What do you do to help you kind of, this is going to build me up a little bit?
I think it changes. For me, it's definitely getting away. And primarily because I know I'm out of access.
Mm-hmm.
People can't rely on me to do something if I'm 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 hours away. But I think there's barriers to people being able to find out what that truly is.
Mm.
If you have money problems, daycare problems, work related problems to where you can't leave, I think it becomes a challenge. And I think it's unrealistic for us to always ask people to know what that is for them. I think sometimes we have to also take that journey to figure out what the small things are that can give us that same fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in that journey right now for myself, trying to find the small things, what milestones can I hit for myself that I can look back and be like, yes, I'm on track. So I think, for me, definitely out of town and spending time with the kids at events, because at home they get on my nerves. But when I was doing their events and sports and, putting in that work for everything we've been training for, that's my getaway. Because I don't care, I might do some work out there, but for them couple minutes when they running or playing basketball, don't nothing matter but cheering them on and giving them direction while they playing.
Yes. So how do you feel like you foster resiliency and grit in your family and in your, I'm saying your family, but really even your programs, your family? I know how you love on those babies and on those kids, but in your family and in your other family, Urban Scouts family too. How do you foster that?
I think it goes back to communication and leading by example.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, I'll call you, or I'll pull a young person to the side and just have a conversation with them. A lot of times, and that's why I work with the young people, because they're yearning for somebody to give them direction.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see them responding to an emotion that creates a behavior, they're looking for a response to that behavior. So really sitting down with people, communicating with my kids as well. I think that's the hardest challenge, is doing it in my own house. Because I feel like they get it so much that they just like, I'm tired of hearing this, Dad. but really fostering communication to where they can understand and questions, making them think about why they do something, how
Mhm.
they did it, uh, so that way they can start to recognize for themselves some of their strengths, some of their weaknesses. Well, I could have did it better this way. Getting them to really think about their options. I think
Mhm.
at times they don't think they have options.
Mhm. Yeah.
Way to build the grit to recognize how resilient you actually are,
Mhm.
to provide the options that was out there and let them see the option they chose and was that the right one.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That's good because it's this work. I have all these boys, my boys. It becomes this whole thing. They always tell me I'm therapizing them. I'm like, I am not. Just they be like, Mom, every time you ask me, I don't know if you, I'm like, I'm not your therapist. I'm your mom. But they think, in their mind, I'm therapizing them. But that's not what I'm doing. But, but they've learned also how to express themselves. And one of the things that I always warms my heart when we're in programming, right? And, your son, he always talks about Wellness Wednesday or mental health or all the stuff that he understands now that you don't see a lot of. And that says a lot, a testament to you and what you've already, talked to him about and shared with him and building that in him. Like he can ask these questions. What does that look like? How do you not only take in information I see, and this is where to me, even how you go from resiliency to grit is because resiliency, I know I can do the bounce back, but now
Mhm,
you thought you had me.
mhm,
You thought, oh yeah, I'm bounced back, but now I'm using it. Now I'm just not using it. I'm using it to catapult me to another space. That is that awareness of saying, wait a minute, oh, I have this skill that someone else doesn't have. That now it can push me to this another level. And I see that in his question. I already see that. Like you see that, like, oh, it's this movement that you can see in young people at times, like and really encouraging that it takes it takes someone to also be vulnerable in themselves. We talk about being vulnerable to say, I ain't been like this all the time. This is I've had to grow and learn. And so like I said, I definitely see that and I feel like we have to continue to foster it all the time. In ourselves being vulnerable, saying, we would do check-ins, all of those things when we're checking in with kids, we're checking in with ourselves, is important in our healing and in that, like I said, that resiliency. Like I'm resilient. Okay, well now what does it go from there? Like you said, like why does it always feel like we always have to be this? Oh, I'm resilient. I don't like to talk about trauma as much anymore because I'm like, well, can we reframe that? And that to me is that's that piece of saying we all have experiences. I mean, we all do. Now, how do we utilize our experiences to change our next experience? That to me is the power. Like you said, that power that comes with that is different. When I'm like, ooh, but it takes reflection. It takes awareness. That sometimes that's what we have to tap into ourselves and tap into individuals we're working with. Even coworkers, each other. I mean, I think that that sense of belonging changes everything. If we
And
know we're gonna
I would add
somebody,
that the power looks different for everyone. All
yes.
right. Because when you hear power, it's like, oh, I'm the boss, or I'm the one in control, or all that. And it's like, nah, this is the power over yourself. Who are you supposed to be? Who do you want to be? Right?
Hmm.
Because they may not want to be the CEO of an organization.
Hmm.
They may want to just go work at Amazon, get a good check, go to work, come home, enjoy their life.
Hmm.
And we can't say that that's no less than being a CEO of your own
Hmm.
business because that's what that person wants. And that's what we cultivate in our young people. Success looks different for everybody,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
got to get exposed to things to know what success can look like for you. If you
Hmm.
grow up in a neighborhood or a community or in an environment that the only successful people you see are drug dealing or playing sports, you're already limited to what you think you can do to get out.
Hmm.
And that's where that resiliency starts to be built at, because you got to take on circumstances to try to figure out, how do I get out? Let me go play these sports, let me go try the streets, let me go get a job, let me go really focus on school. and you learn some of your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them challenges that you have may expose the weaknesses. And sometimes we were just talking about this yesterday, actually. Think about the challenges that Gucci Mane faced, right?
Mm-hmm.
He lived a life to the fullest of being a street dude
Mm-hmm.
and lived what he represented in his music. And he went to prison and he did time in prison. He had the chance to sit back and reflect and
Mm-hmm.
then reshape his narrative on who he wanted to be. And COVID was the same thing for the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
People sit back, reflect, and change their narrative. Now we have the highest unemployment rate. Now we have more we can't find people to work because they like, I don't want to work in that industry. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have worth now. Now we have the highest amount of mental health services actually being sought after because people
Mm-hmm.
realized during COVID they were not happy.
Mm-hmm.
It was just existing and not living to exist. Uh, so I think that, understanding who you are with the flaws involved and who you want to be is how you turn adversity into action.
Mm-hmm.
You got to recognize where you've been at, where you want to go, and then make a plan to get there.
Why do you think so that, look, because I was just as you're talking, I'm like, why do you think people struggle with that? Why do you think people get stuck in like their experiences? Sometimes you get stuck. You're like, I can't, why do you think people get stuck?
It's lonely to be different.
Mm,
It's lonely to walk in a space where I'll speak for myself. I go in a lot of spaces asking for money for black kids, and I'm the only black man in there.
mm-hmm.
And that's where my grit comes in because I'm used to being the only one in spaces. And
Mm-hmm.
spaces just look different. So I think the fear of the unknown is what keeps us back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know what to expect. But if I know if I go to the hood, I can expect to hear gunshots. I can expect to feel
Mm-hmm.
safe for my own safety because I
Yeah.
know what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But if
Mm-hmm.
I go to Hilliard or the suburbs and I don't know them streets and that community feels different, I'm a little more nervous. I'm a little bit more scared to do anything that might get me in trouble, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are set in these boundaries of what's comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And until, sad to say, a lot of times, speaking for myself, you know, until you have a traumatic experience that wakes you up,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you don't get out of it. So what we're trying to do is help our young people who are already going through numerous traumatic
Mm-hmm.
experiences understand how to avoid them and then utilize the experiences that they have to turn that into grit. To
Mm-hmm.
tell them I'd be darned if I ever live with my lights and my gas is off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna make sure that I get a job that's gonna take care of me and my family. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? And giving them the skill sets to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was thinking like, one of the things that holds us back in my mind too is like that shame of our story, of our experience. And it's like, who told us that it was shameful? Who told? We didn't ask ourselves to be in situations that sometimes are difficult, right? They just are, right? And so, but then we get this shame on our experience, and so it holds us back because we ain't given everything to it, to what's next, because we have shame to what we've experienced. And so to me, when you can let go of the shame and let it be what it is,
But that's a hard fight.
it is. That's what that is the biggest fight, because somebody told you that it's been embedded at some point in our upbringing or our society that this is, that makes us feel that this is a shame.
But I think sometimes it ain't even that somebody told you. It may be that you told yourself.
Thank you. It does come from yourself. It does. I mean, a lot of times it might have come for someone else, but then we start to say it to ourselves more and more, like, oh. And so to me, even thinking about this podcast, I want people to be able to be vulnerable, because there's nothing wrong with your story. It's your story. It's what makes you you. If we didn't have these experiences and these situations, we wouldn't be who we are. And so it's like, understanding that we don't have to be shameful. And I mean, I know there's so many, doing this work as a therapist versus as a mentor, as a coach. As a therapist, we weren't allowed to share stories. So you were kind of, even in school, you gotta keep, don't say nothing about your stuff. You couldn't say anything. So over the past 7 years that I've been doing more of this type of work, I've been able to share certain things where people like, okay, I understand you, because also my story isn't shameful. And there's still things that you'd be like, I don't know if I should say nothing about it. You still be like, I don't know if I want to tell nobody about this. But at the end of the day, there's a release that happens when we share our story.
And it's a connection,
Yes.
right? Because, we all have different walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to appeal. I'm not going to say I'm not, but I'm probably less appealing to a young person who went to private school, who is connected with an internship in high school that's in the same area that they're going to go to college for.
Mm-hmm.
Parents have connections to make sure they get that job when they get out, right? So when you said what else keeps them from doing it, it's also that the lack of access to resources and services. But it's not only the lack of, it's the knowledge of as well. Because what you don't know, you don't know. And when some people make it, they don't come back with them resources to the community because they see them as a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, think of it from the streets, right? Somebody get the same product you just got, they're going for the same clientele you got, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the mentality that we have been bred for generations after generations.
Mm-hmm.
I can't let you in, because if I let you in, you're going to take away from me. And the sad thing is, we are one of the only cultures that's like that.
Mm-hmm.
We will not support and uplift each other. If somebody starts a business, we like, oh yeah, that's nice, but I ain't never want to go shop or ask for a discount when we do shop, but we ain't ask Gucci or Louis Vuitton for a discount when we went in there to go pay for that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the knowledge and the access of the resources and services that can help the people truly identify what's going on with them and what's the next steps is probably the most significant piece, because you can work through with the right support network to navigate this. That's why I became who I am. I had a great support network that wouldn't let me fail. They, what you need, how do we do it? And I was thirsty enough to go out there and find it on my own if they couldn't do it. I didn't wait for them to give me a response. By the time they gave me a response, I'm like, oh, I got a response to that response because I did my own research. I think that people need to take hold of finding out the information that they need. That will help guide them to the people they need in their life.
Yeah. And I think that, like you said, though, it's I only know what I know. So I think even for helpers or kiddos or young people we're working with, or whatever our clientele base is, right? Is understanding, like, how do I open up that information? Like, how do I share information so that they can get what they need from it? Because even people listen to this podcast, right? They might be like, oh, I could take this. They might take this one piece that could change one thing we said. That great. I hope that that's helpful. Someone else might take something else from it. But understanding you got to put yourself in front of things to help guide you to something else. And I mean, when I think about us doing the support groups with BCAPS, right? Started years ago when we started that. That how much all of those individuals who were able to be vulnerable and be in that space to be vulnerable, how they have over the time changed, how they've grown.
It takes time, right?
It does.
People think that the changes, and this is a challenge that I've been recognizing myself, like here recently. Like people, we expect the change to happen quick, even if it's been a while, right? It's been years, and we're still expecting this change. We still expect for it to happen quick, especially when we feel like, all right, I'm fed up. I know this is how it's supposed to be. I'm making the moves to make this work. Why
Mm-hmm.
hasn't it worked yet, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then we get frustrated, and we get ready to throw the towel in.
Mm-hmm.
It's for some they throw the towel in, not knowing how close they truly were
Mm-hmm.
uh, to the other side of whatever they were trying to get through.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so we're going to probably wrap up here. I want to. What is your tip? Like, what you like? Okay, if I want to tell anybody, like, when you're thinking about getting to that next level for yourself, that grit, right? Changing that adversity, right, into action. Um, what would you tell them? Like, what would be like your? And in my mind, I'm saying tip, but just like do this. If I could pick one thing, this is what I want you to do. What would you tell them?
Make a plan, right? Uh, and depending on where you are in your life, that plan could be 1 week, 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year, your whole life. Whatever time frame you want to work on, make a plan and then work through that plan backwards. So your goal is to have a job paying you $60,000 a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
What jobs pay $60,000 a year? All right, now you know what jobs. Which ones are hiring? All right, now you know which ones are hiring. What do I need? What are the requirements? How do I get this job? Now you know the requirements. Now you know how to get the job. Who do I need to contact? You literally write down step by step where you're trying to go. And this can be professionally, this
Mm-hmm.
can be personally, this could be your family.
Right.
This could be how do I get my house together?
Mm-hmm.
How do I get my boss to understand that I'm worth the investment of paying for my college? How do I get my partner to understand that I truly love you and I'm working for us? Make a plan,
Mm-hmm.
write it down, and start from the go and work backwards. For me, it's just like because, and then document your progress. I got dozens of books of me building Urban Scouts. I document it. So one day I'm gonna look back, and every time I do look back, which I did, I think around Christmas time,
Mm-hmm.
and I just look to see, and I'm like, man, I accomplished everything in here. But
Yeah.
if you don't have it written down, and you got to, I know you listening right now, I can put it in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I got everything in my head. You lose some details
Mm-hmm.
not written down. And some
Yeah.
of them details might be the missing piece later down the line that you was looking for, that you had, that you lost because you didn't write it down. So my advice is to make a plan, make it smart, and that's specific,
Mm-hmm.
measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Make sure that it's something that you want, and start with figuring out who you are and
Mm-hmm.
what you want for yourself.
Love it. Love it. And it's interesting because we're talking about action. So the fact that you said make a plan, that's action. That's you got to make moves right now, right now, right now. I tell people right now, even if it's five, right now. And it's crazy because I have my tattoo action, right? And I was in a stagnant space at one point, and I needed to be reminded, just move. Even if I don't know what I'm doing, I have to move. I have to try. I have to keep going, because that is where I go from here to here. Sitting and not doing anything ain't gonna help me, and I might not know how to fix it all or understand it all, but if I keep moving, I'm gonna understand a little bit more, right? So for me, when we think about it, it makes so much sense that you're saying creative plan, because you gotta have a action, right? Action is something. Just move. We might mess up how many, when you're doing takes on things, you're like action, and then you'll try it again, action, right? And you'll keep trying. but you have to do something. And sometimes the interesting thing, and I was thinking, I always talk about being a diamond, right? Not everybody can be diamonds, right? You've been through some stuff to be that diamond. Now that diamond is deep in the mountain or the piece of earth that it is, right? And it has to be dug out. Right? You can it ain't sometimes it's not you digging out. I need some people. I need a machine to dig this out right now. Understanding that for me, but once you see that little piece, you be like, oh, I see it. It starts to shine and it can open up so much more. Just that little baby piece. Then when you start opening it up a little bit more, open up, you are shining because you are the only one that can be that. You're the only one that can be that certain cut, that certain type of diamond. It's just you. And so understanding that it might take some work to get there, but when you do, that to me, and every time when you go through stuff, it just continues to increase that worth in you of who you are, and that to me is everything. So when I talk about being a diamond, you so y'all all in this, you all are diamonds, right? Move, take action, right? And allow yourself to be vulnerable. And sometimes I'm not telling you be vulnerable with other people. Be vulnerable with you. Be vulnerable with you and say, wait a minute, Amber, how are you doing with that? Right? Be vulnerable with you, right? Because that is where strength comes from. That ability to be vulnerable. That's where you tap into a strength that is unimaginable, right? So, anything else before we conclude? And I'm gonna let you get on with your day because I know you got the kids today.
Um, I would just say, man, it's a hard fight, uh, and don't expect it to be easy when you're tapping into things that, for one, you probably majority of the time didn't have no control of.
Mm-hmm.
It happened to you. You didn't do it. But it's on you to do the work to determine what actually happened to you
Mm-hmm.
and why you respond the way that you do when you get triggered. Because in that plan, you need to figure out how to restore yourself as you're working through them hard times.
Mm-hmm.
That should be part of the plan. When I get overwhelmed, it's too much, I need an hour to myself where I say, forget everybody, don't bother me, turn my phone on, do not disturb.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, we all working through it right now. We all still trying to figure it out. There's no blueprint. There's no go-to book that everyone in the world is using to create this fantasy of the best life possible. And then we just have to recognize what that best life looks like for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I look. And there's no perfection. It is what it is, and I, that is what makes us who we are, and that to me is like, yeah, we don't have to have it all together, and a lot of times as helpers, we are, oh, like we're supposed to always have it together. And I know over this last year, really being able to identify how you feel and expressing that to people, like you don't have to be, that has been a big strength for my own self. And even as I'm teaching young people or helpers, it's like I can be sad and
Mhm.
I can be sad and happy. He's like, how do you? Yeah, you can be both. So understanding, like, too, as you're thinking about how do I tap into this my grit, or is understanding that I have permission. I can give myself that permission to be two things. To understand that I've been through some stuff and I'm strong, right? Like you can be both. You don't have to be like I'm just strong and I'm not I'm not struggling. You can struggle and be strong. Those things to me say allows yourself to have that permission. Also gives you grace to be like, wait a minute, I can feel this way. I don't have to push it aside so that it comes back and hits me in the face later because I act like I just had to be strong,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, I think that I hope people are listening and creating their own action plan and what that looks like for themselves, um, re-narrating what that is, their story, um, in a different way because they're diamonds. Get out here and shine, because we need some more people out here shining and being able to because their story is not shame. Their story is just is. Like, I don't even say it is. Right? So
And
yeah.
tell them get ready. We we cultivating diamonds over here. Remember us Urban Scouts. So check us out on Facebook. Remember us Urban Scouts. Instagram Urban underscore Scouts underscore. LinkedIn Remember us Urban Scouts. And check out our website www.ru the letter R the letter U urbanscouts.org. Come get your young people involved. Come get your kids involved. We're creating greatness. It starts with our babies to make sure that what we're trying to get accomplished is accomplished, even if it ain't happen, even if it doesn't happen in our lifetime. So check us out, follow us, and remember, you can do it.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Gino. I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll have some more times where we get together. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.